not going to sit idly by and let this country continue its downward spiral. We need leadership, and we need it now.
That we can't live in the past. We can't live in other headlines. We've got to start focusing on what's going to make America strong and proud.
I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer to the Republican establishment.
We are dealing with extraordinarily important issues facing this country right now.
We need a president and a candidate who will actually help our base solidify.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Well, the third Republican presidential debate is over. You are here with us. We thank you for trusting us to give you a kind of a breakdown. We're going to spend the next hour doing that. I will describe for you in brief what occurred in the 2 hours of the Republican presidential debate, and please don't mistake brevity for glibness. So, inflation, bad. Border, close it. Israel, whatever it takes. Ukraine, maybe, maybe not. TikTok, banned. Then a conversation about how many ships in the U.S. Navy going forward. Venezuela, fentanyl. And then very, very late in this evening's proceedings, a conversation about abortion. And a lot of back and forth about what the Republican Party ought or ought not to do on that particular issue. And then, as you might have heard in that opening, some sentiments expressed about what just happened. The elections held yesterday. A couple of Republicans on the stage said the Republican Party is losing far more than it ought to. Here is a summary of some of the things said tonight on stage. Let's listen.
If you look where we are now, it's a lot different than where we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance.
These problems are so big and serious that the first thing I would say to Prime Minister Netanyahu is pretty simple. America is here, no matter what it is you need at any time, to preserve the state of Israel.
Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
I wear heels. They're not for a fashion statement. They're for ammunition. I'm telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to see
The fact of the matter is she doesn't answer
So this
the
is what
question.
I will...
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my
before
daughter
appreciating
out of your
anybody else's
voice.
adult daughter. The next generation of Americans.
What we should do is ban TikTok, period. Now, we saw under former President Trump, he tried to ban TikTok twice, but was struck down by our federal courts. If you cannot ban TikTok, you should eliminate the Chinese presence on the app.
We should be arming Taiwan. Make sure they have the equipment they need. Make sure they have the training they need now. There's nothing China fears more than knowing that America will have Taiwan's back.
I'm going to unleash all of America's energy potential. On day one, I'm taking all the Biden regulations, the Green New Deal, ripping it up and throwing it in the trash can where it belongs.
We are already overtaxed in this country, and we should not raise those taxes.
And I think we can get to 3, 4, maybe even 5% GDP growth if we really take the regulatory shackles off of our economy. And against that backdrop, I believe this is our last best window to be able to take care of our national debt problem through those severe measures, including sacrificing the foreign wars that many bloodthirsty members of both parties have a hunger for.
Let me just say to my mama and to every other mama or grandfather receiving Social Security, as President of the United States, I will protect your Social Security.
Not pictured former President Trump. And we have learned through our colleague Ed O'Keefe that former President Trump's not going to participate in the fourth debate either. More on that in a little bit. You just saw him a moment ago. Let's bring him back. Robert Costa, who is our chief elections and campaign correspondent. He joins us now. Robert, your instant summary of the evening's events.
Major, great to be with you from here inside the spin room in Miami, Florida. It was a heated debate night here in Miami. It was clear that so many of these contenders on stage are searching for some way, any way, to become a viable, credible alternative to the front runner in this race, former President Donald Trump. And it's not easy. There were skirmishes at times about policy, especially on Israel and at abortion, as you mentioned, at the end. But ultimately, this was not a night about Trump. He loomed over this debate as a shadow just down the road holding his rally, but he didn't fixate the interest of those on stage. They're still making their appeals to the donors, to the voters on their own terms, not exactly trying at this point to barrel through Trump.
And Robert, to that point, which I think exactly encapsulates the evening, yes, it was spirited at times. It had some interesting jousting on policy and some politics. But still, without the former president there, it is not a direct engagement. And therefore, it seems to me, and I wonder if this is your impression and those in the spin room, that though they engaged with one another, without Trump, it's hard to make that big next leap.
It is certainly going to be difficult. I've traveled the country alongside you over the past year tracking this primary campaign. And Major, I just think days ago, I was sitting in New York City in a courtroom watching a former president testify about allegedly committing fraud against the state of New York. That, in any other circumstance of a presidential race, would be a dominant topic. Yet it kind of was mentioned in a roundabout way here a few times, his legal challenges, but otherwise was disregarded by those on stage. And former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, perhaps the most pointed against Trump. But it's evident to me as a reporter that the tension in this race right now is, yes, Vivek Ramaswamy is taking everybody on, but it's really about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former Ambassador Nikki Haley as they pitch traditional Republicans to be their standard bearer.
And in that context, Robert, how important does the DeSantis campaign believe the endorsement from Iowa's very popular Republican governor, Kim Reynolds, is this week and will be in every week between now and the Iowa caucuses?
They believe it's very important, but as we've always discussed, Major, sitting next to each other at CBS, Kim Reynolds, any Iowa governor, it gives you some political capital, but it's not everything. Iowa's Republican Party is not just a party, it's a series of activists and community groups and church leaders who end up coming up to a consensus at times about who's going to be their favorite. I think about the late break toward Mike Huckabee in 2008, the late break toward Rick Santorum in 2012 or Ted Cruz in 2016. And what we're seeing now is a bit of a start of a late break toward Governor DeSantis. But what the DeSantis campaign is watching, and so is the Trump campaign, and so is the Christie campaign, to be sure, is New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who has not made an endorsement yet. And he likely, I'm told by sources close to him, is going to come down to Ambassador Haley or Governor DeSantis. He is friendly, though, with Governor Christie. I spoke with the governor when he came by CBS this week. He said he still hasn't made a decision, but he wants somebody who's able to beat Trump long term as this nomination fight unfolds.
Robert Costa with us in the spin room in Miami. Thank you so very much. Well, I've got some anchor buddies here. That's what we call them in the biz. I want to bring them on our political panel. That's the other formal name. Ashley Etienne and Devin O'Malley. You can see them on screen now. Ashley, CBS News political contributor, former communications director for Vice President Kamala Harris and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Devin is the managing director for narrative strategies and an advisor to former Vice President Mike Pence, who recently dropped out of this race. That's why we didn't see him on the debate stage tonight. Devin, your impressions as someone who was advising a candidate who was in this race, recently on the debate stage. Any takeaways from you on this evening just concluded?
Well, I think we saw another debate that didn't really move the needle at the end in the big race. But ultimately here, we always viewed the campaign as a race to take on Donald Trump. And so to that extent, I think that DeSantis and Haley landed a number of blows on one another. I think that Vivek Ramaswamy needed to come out as likable because he hasn't done that in any debate yet. And I'm not sure he even came close to that mark. Senator Tim Scott needed to land a major blow and to have a breakout moment. And he just didn't quite do it at times. And we saw a different Chris Christie, I think, than we've seen in the past, and much less bombast and a much more sober, kind of judicious type of candidate. But again, I don't think anything moves the needle in terms of taking on Trump right now. But I think in the short term, the race to take on Trump, I think that Haley and DeSantis made a little bit of progress with one another.
Devin, you know from bitter experience that fundraising is the lifeblood of a sustainable presidential campaign. There is a conversation going on among Republican donors right now. Where to put your money? Do you keep investing in DeSantis or do you move over to Haley? And I've talked to some donors who've already made the transition. There are lots of phone calls going on. Hey, look, if you haven't given, give to her now. Now's the time to back Haley. Do you think anything happened tonight to change those conversations or those allocations?
I think the conversations that were happening before the debate will continue to happen. I think Nikki didn't backslide at all, right? I think she continued to show that she has foreign policy credentials. I would have liked to see a little bit more out of her on the domestic side, but she continued to show that she's a formidable candidate. She's not going to back down. She was impressive on stage. She hit back a very cheap attack from Vivek Ramaswamy when he brought up her adult daughter, which was totally bizarre. And she's a tough candidate, and I think she showed a really stiff spine, and I think that donors are looking for that in a candidate who might eventually have to take on Donald Trump head-to-head.
Ashley?
Yeah.
Your impressions?
I don't think, I mean, I agree that I don't think the needle was moved very far. I don't think anyone walked away with any different impression of any of the candidates than when they went in. I think what I was struck by, I think Nikki Haley met the moment. And she has consistently met the moment. She looked prepared. She had attack lines for everyone. I mean, she didn't let anyone slide or move. Like, nothing went unanswered when it came to her. She got, overwhelming response from the audience, from everything from foreign policy to even her answer on abortion. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think she really proved herself to be very presidential. But I will say this, DeSantis totally disappeared on stage. I almost forgot he was even there. I mean, the entire time. So I don't know that I would put my money on him at all. I think if I'm a Republican donor, I'm betting on Nikki Haley. She performed very well and
one of the things that
fearless.
Nikki Haley and those around her like to say about her campaign is it is the most threatening to President Biden if he's the Democratic nominee, as all Democrats expect that he will be, at least currently. Do you think that's true? Do you think Nikki Haley represents a tougher challenge if she became the Republican nominee than, let's say, former President Trump would?
Absolutely, no doubt. I think if she wins, it becomes a totally different game. It's a different ball game. We have to recalibrate on a lot of different fronts. So I think it definitely would be a tough, hard race. But here's the thing, she can't run away from Trump. So I think the Democratic Party would hold her accountable for his record. President Biden, strong footing, again, 4 cycles he's been winning, great record, bipartisan record. Many of the things that she can't say that would contrast well with her, but I definitely think it would be a tough race.
Devin, very quickly, do you think Nikki Haley has a chance, and I mean a real chance, to become the Republican nominee?
I do. I think the air of inevitability has increased and continues to increase around Donald Trump, but a lot remains to be seen with his legal challenges in the spring, and I still think that there is a candidate that could emerge, and I think that Nikki's positioned herself well to be that candidate.
Here's the other thing. In politics, all that matters is a trend line. Mm-hmm. Her trend is going up in terms of polling, fundraising, so she's in a strong position.
Control room was telling me ever so politely I need to say thank you, at least for the time being. Ashley Etienne, Devin O'Malley, thank you very much. The front runner of the Republican primary, well, yes, as mentioned, he skipped this debate. What was Donald Trump doing instead? Well, he was counter-programming. More on that. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides and our continuing very good coverage of the third Republican presidential debate. I just threw that in. Republican presidential candidate Will Hurd joins us now from the debate spin room in Miami. He is speaking to us, full disclosure, as a surrogate for Nikki Haley's 2024 presidential campaign. Will Hurd, good to see you. I'm sure you believe Nikki Haley won. Let's skip that part, or at least tell us the part where you think you can explain why she won.
Yeah, I think she won because she showed, from whether it was the issue of domestic policy, foreign policy, or abortion, she showed real leadership. This is why she is proving that she's the only alternative to Donald Trump. This race is coming down to a man and a woman. And you're seeing what is happening in New Hampshire and in Iowa, what Nikki Haley is being able to do. She also showed a grasp of the serious issues that we're facing as a country. She recognizes that we have multiple domains in which to fight the Chinese and potentially the Russians and all of our adversaries. And I think this is why America saw what a Republican president, the next Republican president, can look like, because of her grasp of the issues.
Will you know the knock that other campaigns say about Nikki Haley? She's the perceived moderate. A moderate will never win the Republican nomination as the party is currently constructed. Your reply to that?
Well, my reply to that is that's pretty crazy. You know, Nikki Haley is America's choice. When you look at a guy like Vivek, he's TikTok's choice. When you look at someone like Ron DeSantis, he's more interested in being a image of Donald Trump than following his own advice. And so that's the reality. Nikki Haley is tough. She's smart. She's smooth. She has a great understanding of the issues. And this notion that she is a moderate. She was the governor in a very conservative state. She's proven her conservative credentials, but she's also someone who can talk to the American people. The fact that she had a grasp of issues that every day voters are dealing with is a sign of respect. She's also the only person that understands the impact of serving overseas and serving or having someone serve in the military because her husband is away right now. So this notion that she's a the fact that everybody on this stage attacked her is a sign that this momentum is real, and she has a chance, and she's the person that's best to beat Joe Biden. Everybody's been talking about this poll from New York, the New York Times poll, but guess what? The thing everybody's forgetting to talk about is that Nikki Haley was beating Joe Biden by a bigger margin than any of the other Republican candidates. That's why we have a choice, and this is why I want to start seeing some of these other candidates get behind Nikki Haley now so that we can have wins in November and not see what happened last night happen in 2024.
Will Hurd, there is a perspective that without former President Trump on stage, it simply isn't the kind of debate it otherwise would be. How frustrated are you as a Haley surrogate that she doesn't have the opportunity to take whatever her message is directly against former President Trump on a debate stage? And in that regard, it sounds like from Chris LaCivita, the former president's campaign manager, he's not going to be at the fourth debate. Does that continue to deprive Nikki Haley of what she needs most, which is a direct confrontation?
Well, it deprives the country, right? Donald Trump is afraid to show up and talk about his record. He's afraid to show up and talk about his baggage. He's afraid to show up and have to handle folks talking and forcing him to talk about his issues. He wants to talk about all the great things he did when he was president, but a lot of those things were created by other people that are no longer in the government. So yes, it would be a great contrast for the American people to see, leaders of old, and having someone, a leader of the next generation, like Ambassador Haley. The fact that Nikki Haley has agreed with Donald Trump on some things, but she's also not been afraid to disagree with him. She disagreed with him on China. Xi Jinping is not someone to cozy up to. She disagrees with him on Ukraine and recognizes that defending Ukraine is good for the U.S. national interest. She disagrees with him on his criticism of Israel and what's happening right now. So she's proven that she's willing to do that, and she's proven her conservative credentials, and she's proven that she's willing to have serious conversations and has a grasp of these issues that are going to impact every single American over the next couple of years.
Former Texas Congressman, one-time presidential candidate, and now Nikki Haley surrogate, Will Hurd. Thank you so much for your time. We will take you back to the spin room for more debate night coverage. That's in a moment. In the meantime, you're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Not content to allow the third Republican presidential debate that he boycotted, just like the first and the second, to stand on its own, former President Trump held a campaign rally right alongside, time-wise, in Hialeah, Florida, not far from the debate stage in Miami. And he did so while those Republican challengers faced off in that aforementioned third debate of the primary season. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is in Hialeah, Florida, where the former president is continuing to hold his counter-programming rally. Ed, set the scene for us.
Major, he has spoken today to a few thousand supporters in this city just outside Miami, a few miles from where the other 5 are debating tonight. The idea was to highlight his support among Latino voters in this part of South Florida that helped him win this state 7 years ago tonight. And then, of course, in 2020, again, even though he ended up losing the White House, the hope here is to remind those of us in the press, remind voters that President Biden's support among Latino voters, black voters, young voters is slipping, and it's in communities like this that he believes he's ultimately going to prevail. What's ironic, however, Major, is while he and others spoke about the dangers of socialism and communism that, of course, resonate and are far more urgent in communities like this, full of Cuban, Venezuelan, and Nicaraguan refugees and migrants, he also talks about Hungary's leader, Orban, who, of course, is no democratically elected leader. The Democrats, the White House would remind us, is someone who has spoken fondly of Russian leader Vladimir Putin, who has raised questions about the utility of the war in Ukraine. So how does that square with this alleged concern about socialism and communism? Be that as it may, a supportive crowd here for him tonight, and he picked up a key endorsement from his former press secretary, Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
And did you have a chance while you were there, Ed, to meet any of the Trump either campaign surrogates or surrogates in waiting, or those who are campaigning for offices of their own, but within the Trump, let us say, orbit or inner circle?
Indeed, we did, Major. We spoke earlier this evening with Kari Lake, of course, the failed Arizona gubernatorial candidate now running for the U.S. Senate. And I asked her specifically how people in this crowd would perceive, would respond to the court appearance by the former president this week and by his children. Take a listen.
This is a weaponization of our government at a federal level, a state level, a local level. And the people here know what's going on. The only people who don't seem to understand it, unfortunately, are mainstream media, who are getting a thrill covering this absolute witch hunt that has been happening at the hands, frankly, of the mainstream media for 8 years. They've been attacking President Trump for 8 years. The people are onto it.
We are a nation that in many ways...
That's a sampling of the reaction from Trump supporters here tonight. Kari Lake, of course, herself a former television journalist, but one who has thrived on media criticism ever since. Others on stage tonight made similar comments, expressed similar concerns about the future of the nation's journalism, and expressed support for the former president, who made passing reference to the trials in New York and elsewhere, and only made vague passing references to 2 of those opponents on stage tonight. I heard him talk, of course, about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and he used the various nicknames he has for him. And then South Carolina Governor, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, for whom he also has a nickname. Those are the 2 they're probably most concerned about, especially in Iowa right now, where the Trump campaign knows they're vulnerable, where they're going to be spending a lot of time and energy in the coming weeks, but where they ultimately anticipate they will prevail by double digits, Major.
Ed, very quickly, any recognition from the former president or Kari Lake about what was obviously a disappointing Tuesday night for Republicans in terms of election outcomes?
Didn't hear it, Major, which is telling, because Democrats certainly would point out that it was Donald Trump who set in motion the end of the Roe versus Wade abortion policy across the country. It was Trump-backed Daniel Cameron in Kentucky who lost. It was Republicans who were supporting the abortion, or against the abortion rights initiative in Ohio. No mention of it by him of real note. Instead focused on President Biden, his legal troubles, and his hope to return to the White House.
Ed O'Keefe in Hialeah, Florida, we thank you so very much for your time. CBS News political director Finn Gomez joins us now from Miami in the Spin Room post-debate. Finn, your impressions and what people are saying there in the ever-truthful Spin Room.
Yeah, the ever-truthful spin room. We've already seen a bunch of surrogates, and Vivek Ramaswamy's right here, right next to me. But the big dynamic here that everyone is talking about is the back and forth between Nikki Haley and Governor Ron DeSantis. Really, those two vying essentially for that number 2 slot, if you will. In recent polling, we've seen that they have essentially been even in second place, a distant second place to Donald Trump. But still, you saw a lot of back and forth between those two. And also between Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, and Nikki Haley over that TikTok incident, if you will, about them using that social media platform. I did ask Vivek Ramaswamy what he felt about being called a scum by Nikki Haley after he referenced that her own daughter used the TikTok platform, and he basically said that people shouldn't be criticized for using or campaigning on TikTok, on that social media platform, as he does. But didn't really answer directly why he referenced her. But a lot of drama here in the spin room here, Major.
So one thing that is always true in a spin room, there are no losers in any spin room, Republican or Democratic. That's why I called it the truthful place. Finn, the dynamics of this race, according to our esteemed panel, who I'll get back to here at the table in a few moments, was that nothing really moved tonight. The needle, metaphorically, didn't move. And whatever competition occurred on that stage was essentially a competition for second place, but as you said, a remaining distant second from the current frontrunner, former President Trump. Is there any sentiment in that spin room that dynamic, which has been in existence for months now, has been in any way altered?
I think we need to talk about the issues I talked about on that stage.
In a word, no. No. That dynamic has not shifted. The sense is that dynamic has not shifted or changed after tonight's debate. I think if you took the next few surveys that we may see, I'd be surprised if there'd be a major shift in the current trajectory of this race. And I think that's a sense that we at least hear in this spin room tonight.
And you spend a fair amount of time, Finn, talking to those in the Trump inner circle. They know this, do they not? And they do find justification in this strategy of not attending. True?
And I think, again, it's going to take a different...
Yeah, absolutely. I've asked them directly, why not attend? Why not, your boss likes to get in front of a camera, frankly, and speak to millions. Doesn't want to speak to his supporters. And they frankly say over and over and over again that it's not worth the political risk. They've calculated it. He's so far ahead that by him coming to these debates, by him mixing it up with the rivals who are frankly so far behind him in the recent polling, that it's not worth the political risk to do that, to engage at this level. I have heard from senior Trump officials who told me that they're not going to play prevent defense either. They're not going to take this for granted. They do feel confident about the trajectory, but I do not expect any change in the upcoming debates of having the former president attend.
CBS News political director Finn Gomez, thank you so much. Let's bring back our political panel, my anchor buddies here at the table, Ashley Etienne, Devin O'Malley. Devin, is this ultimately, though it frustrates the Republicans on stage, smarter than not for the former president not to be there?
If you're former President Trump, I don't know why you would be up on that stage. I think at least 4 people would probably be slinging arrows your way and would be exposing a lot of your vulnerabilities and weaknesses and putting you in a tough position to explain some of the changes that he's gone in just the last couple of years on policy. I think this is a former president who campaigned as a conservative, who, with Mike Pence by his side, governed as a conservative, but has abandoned those conservative policies and adopted a campaign of grievance and has begun to talk about, he's abandoned the issue of life, as we talked about earlier. He wants to talk about essentially a 10% tax on all Americans by imposing tariffs on goods coming into the country. I mean, these are a complete abandonment.
And using words like retribution.
Yeah, and so
and getting rid of the Constitution. I mean, a whole lot of it.
Chief among
Ashley, as someone who views this from a Democratic lens and an avid supporter of President Biden's reelection campaign. Are you happy he's not debating? Do you want him to be off stage and soft in case there are debates in a general election?
You mean Donald Trump?
Yes.
No, I want Donald Trump to be debating with the other Republican candidates, because I agree with Will Hurd that the American people deserve to hear from him. I mean, especially in this moment. I just wanted to say, though, I just got some talking points from the Democratic Party, and their sort of lines coming out of the debate was last night MAGA Republicans lost. They're double down on that losing agenda tonight in the debate. And I think that that's absolutely true. But I think to your question about Donald Trump being there, no doubt. And I think he's obviously afraid. He's obviously got something to hide.
But is there something shrewd and calculating that's working for him in the present? Not being there and not going to these debates?
100%. No doubt. I mean, I think it's a smart strategy on his part. Don't laugh at that. I think it's a smart strategy on his part. But again, I mean, you know, and I know you sort of identified me as a strong Biden supporter and as a Democrat, but first, I'm an American citizen. And I want to hear from anybody who wants to be the president. I think they should be held to account. They should be asked tough questions. They should be able to answer them. And he's got an entire record he needs to answer for. Not just saying that he wants to abolish the Constitution, but you know, his abysmal record on COVID, from COVID to, you know, January 6th, to attempts to overturn the election. I mean, there's so much that the American people deserve to hear from Donald Trump about that we're not actually challenging him on. So I just think it's despicable that he doesn't show up. I also think it's more despicable that the Republicans didn't raise his name, his record more frequently in this debate. It was a missed opportunity. How do you beat someone if you're not going to take them on directly? That doesn't happen in politics.
I thought it was especially notable when the debate opened up and Vivek did this monologue about how he's sick of being a loser and how we, as Republicans, lost last night. A culture of losing. Lost last night, lost in 2022, lost in 2020. And yet doesn't name former President.
Let's go back to 18. You've been losing since Donald Trump showed up, honestly.
But doesn't invoke former President Trump's name.
But doesn't.
Exactly.
And he's
precisely.
As having anything, even tangentially, to do with that. Ashley Etienne, Devin O'Malley, thank you so very much. Up next, we will speak with Ron DeSantis' campaign manager. You are streaming America Decides. Welcome back. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said this evening that former President Trump is a different guy than he was in 2016, and he owed it to Republican voters to be on that debate stage. Well, he wasn't there, but nevertheless, Governor DeSantis, as forcefully as he could, made his case for why he should receive the Republican Party's nomination. This just days after receiving an endorsement, which the DeSantis campaign believes could be pivotal, from Iowa's popular Republican Governor Kim Reynolds. Governor DeSantis' campaign manager, James Uthmeyer, joins us now. James, it's good to see you. I know you believe Governor DeSantis won. We'll skip that part. Tell me what happened tonight that will propel the DeSantis campaign where it most immediately needs to be propelled, which is in the state of Iowa.
Yeah, so again, 3 for 3, Ron DeSantis showed up. He won the night. He showed up as a fighter. Everybody knows he's a fighter. But what makes him different is he fights and wins. We need someone who will fight, win, and then lead America's great comeback. Tonight, he spoke directly to people at home in a way that no other candidate on stage did. He talked about the very, personal stories that he's encountering on the campaign trail that are really impacting, him as he explains his vision for the people. People that have suffered from fentanyl, people that have suffered from the invasion at the border, people that are suffering at home, unable to afford their mortgage, unable to afford gas. That's because of Bidenflation. This is not easy for the American dream to succeed anymore. And Ron DeSantis, he showed he will fight, win, and lead at a time that is so important as Republicans just yesterday had sweeping losses across the country. We need a new leader who will enable us to win again.
James, you know well, and I know you're battling all the sounds around you, and you're doing so gamely, so I applaud you for that. But you know the narrative that there is this inevitability about former President Trump, that he's so far ahead he simply cannot be caught. Explain to our audience the theory of the case, how he can be caught, and not just caught, but surpassed.
Sure. Well, it's clear out there that over 70% of the electorate, they're looking at their options. They're very much open to another option. They want a fresh change. They want somebody that can actually show up and serve 2 terms. They want somebody that can win again. And I'll tell you who definitely doesn't believe this thing is over, and that's the former president. He's spending millions of dollars of attack ads in Iowa against Ron DeSantis. He's sending top staff there. He's constantly, tweeting about Ron DeSantis and his appearance while things like hurricanes and war, are breaking out. It's definitely bothering him. He sees where the threat is. He knows who the American people are ultimately going to want to side with. And I think his behavior, that tells us everything we need to know.
James, it was late in tonight's proceedings, but there was a lively conversation about abortion and the Republican Party. The governor signed a 6-week ban in Florida. So is Governor Reynolds in Iowa. Governor Haley, former Governor Haley, and others talked about maybe something in the 15-week range or something that is a larger consensus. Do you believe the governor's position, sharply defined on the issue of abortion, is a net positive in this primary campaign and can be well defended should he become the Republican nominee?
Sure, yeah. So the governor recognizes that in the wake of the Dobbs case, a lot of the decision-making here went back to the states. And states are going to fall down in different areas as it becomes more of a states' rights issue. That said, there are states like California where many are still advocating for abortion all the way up until birth, and some even arguing after birth. This is extreme. It's horrific. He does believe there is a case for the federal government to intervene there. The idea that Congress is going to get together and put together some sort of 15 or 12-week ban, that's just not realistic. And it's unfortunate that these types of hypotheticals take away from some of the real hard issues that are facing Americans out there that need to be discussed.
But, James, is there anything about yesterday's results, specifically in Ohio and Virginia, that give the governor or you as his campaign manager pause about abortion and its long-term effects on the Republican Party and those who seek to lead it?
Sure. Look, I don't know that all the results from yesterday are necessarily dependent on abortion. Shoot, the governor signed a 15-week bill last year in Florida and then won the state by over 20 points, a swing state. He drugged the legislative races all with him and turned Florida deep red, which has enabled the state to put together a strong agenda to perform well, to help people out on record-setting, tax relief for families, on record-setting infrastructure, combating the border. You name the issue, school choice, you name it, he's done it. And he did that because of strong leadership and an ability to win. So, on the pro-life topic, I do think the conservative movement needs to regroup and better strategize, work on its messaging a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think it's more about the larger lack of political leadership. We need somebody that can win. I can't say that enough. And that person is Ron DeSantis. He's proven it over and over again. He delivers.
Campaign manager for Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, James Uthmeyer, thanks so much for your time. We'll have more on tonight's debate in just a second. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back. Transparency. Politicians talk about it all the time. I'm going to be a little transparent. This is the last block of our hour conversation about the third Republican presidential debate. We're going to go to the panel, but there is a possibility while I'm talking to the panel, Republican presidential candidate Tim Scott may be available to us. And so I may have to interrupt, and we'll go back to Miami to talk to Senator Scott if he becomes available. In the meantime, let's bring back our panel, Ashley Etienne, Devin O'Malley. So, Ashley, I want you to hear your reaction to what Governor DeSantis' campaign manager just said. Mm-hmm. Maybe the conservative movement needs to work on its messaging on abortion. Whenever I hear that, it's a messaging problem, I always say, no, it's probably a policy or fact problem.
Mm-hmm. Or candidate problem, too.
Or candidate problem. Yeah. Your take on that?
I mean, I think the Republican Party is in an identity crisis. I think tossing around these words, moderate, conservative, don't matter anymore. I think that they're completely lost in the wilderness. So I don't really buy that. I mean, I think the real question,
yes,
all due respect, Major,
please,
should have been why it is that the Republican field is not coalescing around one candidate, and that candidate being DeSantis.
Right.
He right now is in the strongest of positions. But for some reason, folks, as he pointed out, 70% of Republicans are looking for an alternative, but yet he's been in this race for 6-7 months, and it's not him. You know,
Yeah,
at what point does it become, to your point, it become more about the candidate than it is about the message?
Where he started looked a lot stronger than where he is now. The summer has been an unkind summer to the DeSantis campaign, the DeSantis super PAC, and the DeSantis stock in the Republican Party.
But he's still above water. I mean, this is compared to Vivek Ramaswamy, who has been underwater since September 11th. But so I guess
But there was a sort of anticipation about
Absolutely.
DeSantis that has not been realized.
And I think if you look at all the candidates, Ron DeSantis has faced, I think the number somewhere along the lines of $28 million in negative attack ads, and he's still above water. I think that's saying something. I think we discussed, when we were off air a moment ago, that we noticed a softer tone from him. And I think that this is something intentional on his part. I think there's a recognition that in order to be the Trump alternative, you need to stop talking like Trump and stop emulating his policies and stop emulating his style and tone and tenor. And I think we kind of started to get there. And I think all of that will help show voters that he is more electable. When I say more electable, that he can beat Trump, because if you're not, out of that 70%, there's 10 to 20% that would go back to and support Trump if they were given the option, but they need to be presented with an alternative. And DeSantis hasn't really given them that alternative. They've given them more Trump. And if you're given more Trump, why wouldn't you just be with Trump? At the end of the day.
Yeah, my best advice, I thought DeSantis' big breakout moment is when he really leaned on his biography, when he talked about his from the bottom to the top story. And I think that's where he should get back to that point, stay there, and then enter in through your policies, your policy agenda, through your personal story. And I think that's what will have more resonance with people, humanize him more, and really get him out of this sort of conservative versus not, but make him seem very practical and connected to the American experience.
From your perspective, Devin, what is the rationale for Vivek Ramaswamy? Does he look to you like just a Trump wingman there to knock down anyone who might be a threat to President Trump's renomination?
I guess there was an argument for that early on, but as his favorability wanes, what's the efficacy, in that? I think people just tune him out now, and I'm not really sure how much value he added to the debate today. So yeah, I think that was my first thought early on when he first emerged and we were still in the race. And I assume that's what he's still doing, but I don't know how much value there is in it.
And Ashley, again, your closing impressions on former Ambassador Haley. If you were to pick a quote unquote winner tonight, would you say by a slight or large margin it was former Ambassador Haley?
Overwhelmingly, I would pick her and select her as the winner by a huge margin. Again, she presented herself very strong, fearless. I mean, all the things that I think resonate with Republican voters. Strong, fearless, prepared. And so, yeah, I think the question is let's see if she gets a bump after the debate.
We will see if she gets a bump. And it all really augurs about what happens the next couple of weeks, or maybe 3 or 4 weeks in Iowa. Much more conversation. I got to close it out now. Devin O'Malley, Ashley Etienne, thank you very much. Well, Senator Tim Scott didn't show up, so, maybe next time. Thanks so much for joining us. That does it for tonight, a full hour of post-debate coverage. I thank you for hanging out with us. I'm Major Garrett. You're streaming CBS News. We'll see you next time.